meeting to address a business license, so we'll do that first. Council Order Number 050901, public hearing and action on the issuance of business licenses. Yuki Abra LLC, DBA Finelli's of Bangor, 12 Down East Highway for a new City Class C licensed victualler liquor and new state restaurant liquor license Class 1, 2, 3, and 4 malt and vinous. This is a public hearing. I'll open the public hearing. Public hearing is open. Mr. Abra is in attendance. You don't have to say anything.
That's all right. My name's Aaron Healy.
Okay.
Nice to meet you all.
Anybody from the public wish to comment? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Public hearing is closed. Councilman?
Move approval, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor? Unanimous. Motion passes. And we will come out of, well, I need a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor? We are adjourned from the special meeting, and now we will go into the workshop. And I'll just note for the record, Councilor Miller is participating in the workshop. He did not participate in the last vote because we don't have rules that allow for remote participation, so that's why he didn't vote on that. Councilor Lyons is excused. He may get here, but he's likely not. So with that, I'll turn it over to Manager Mosier.
Well, tonight, I'm happy to say, is a light lift for me. I don't have a thing to discuss with you all except to turn it over to the school department and Superintendent Katrina Kane to fill you all in on what you've been provided for their budget request. So it's all yours.
Manager Mosier, you were just a little too giddy and excited about all of that. Good evening, everyone. I'm Katrina Kane, the interim superintendent for, I almost just said Hancock, for Ellsworth School Department. And I'm pleased to be here tonight to present this budget to you. I'd be remiss if I didn't start by saying how appreciative I am to the teachers and staff at the schools that helped put this budget together, the building administrators and department heads, and I'm fortunate to be working with a very supportive school board, and more fortunate to be working with a very dedicated and competent business staff in our office. Those of you who don't know, Carolyn Heller is the business manager for the school department and has been since withdrawal from RSU 24, so almost just a few months shy of 8 years here. And I'm very fortunate that she's been there for consistency. That continuity is really helpful in putting this budget together. As you can imagine, and you know because you're working through other budgets, it's certainly been a challenging year. In addition to the transition, there are lots of factors around us that are making budgeting challenging, rising wages, increases in fuel and electricity costs, just to name a few. And those really are the biggest drivers in our budget. But nonetheless, we have done what we can to do our part in keeping this budget as steady as possible. And so the budget we have tonight to present to you has a 0.63 increase of just under $72,000. So with that, I'm going to go down through the top sheet of the packet that you received, and I'll just talk through what's up, what's down, and why. And then be happy to take any questions from you. I don't have all the answers, but I'm confident that between myself and Carolyn and the team that's here, we have Amy Bowles, who's the director of HCTC, April Clifford, who's the principal of EMS K through 4, and Dan Clifford, principal of the high school here as well, to help answer any questions that I might not know in terms of the details. So for, on the expenditure side for FY '23, regular instruction, you'll see the increase there, and that is, that 5.51% increase is essentially the addition of 2 regular education ed techs, and those are to be shared across the K-4 and 5-8 school at EEMS. And the reason for that is these are ed techs who will work with students who are not special education, but they have behavioral needs such that we need somebody to be able to attend to them when they need a break so that they can come out of the regular classroom, we can meet those students' needs, and then the regular learning in the classroom that's happening can keep moving forward. So those 2 ed tech positions are new in the budget for next year. And other than that, they're just increases in salary and insurance. For special education, we have additional educational technicians that we've hired this year, so changes in wages also and benefits. I should note that the majority of your collective bargaining agreements in Ellsworth, because of when you withdrew, those were all negotiated essentially at one time, and so next year that's coming up for the school department once again. There's a few, there's some that happen on a little bit of a different schedule, but we're definitely mindful of the changes that will be coming our way with those, particularly with local conditions and hourly wages. For career and technical education, the increase there, 6.86%, that 127,000, that really is predominantly supplies and electricity costs, but supplies for everything from welding materials, pretty much every department is experiencing that in the technical area. Other instruction, that cost center is, contrary to belief, not a slush fund. It is a place where things like summer school, after school programming, co and extracurricular are all budgeted there. And the change there is predominantly an increase to some of the coaching and athletic stipends that we have and trying to equalize that scale. And also purchasing additional services from the athletic trainer that we have. That's a contracted service that we share with other schools. Student and staff services, that section is everything from guidance to social workers, health, curriculum, lots of places under that. And the changes there are, sorry, I lost my place, hang on just a second. And I lost my note. I'm gonna have to look, and Carolyn, you might have to,
I'm sorry, what are you looking at?
the addition under student and staff services, the additional increase there, oh, nope, I found it, sorry. Lost my place, lots of lines. That is predominantly additional software, some hardware, and an increase to information technology wages, hourly personnel. There's a lot of software that teachers have been using during the pandemic that we really like and find is very engaging for students, and some of those pieces they wish to keep. System administration, the change there is an additional business office staff member that was recommended. We've known this for some time and have heard that through the audit as well, that our office has been understaffed for some time. In case not everyone's aware, we share services right now with both the Hancock and Lemoyne School Department. So all of the business staff, HR, accounts payable are not just doing their work for the Ellsworth School Department, but also for Hancock and Lemoyne. We've shared those services since withdrawal. School administration, actually we discovered, unfortunately, just recently that we have an error. One of the last times that we pulled the budget across and totaled it, and we actually left administrator out of the budget. And we thought, we'd just try to run a school without an administrator next year and just see how that goes, and it's the high school. So we'll keep you posted. No, it just was it's an error, and we will No, it's not that we don't like that person, really it isn't. It's just just an error in the tally with the software, and so we're going to have to figure that piece out right there.
Katrina?
Yes, so it shows a decrease of 3%, but
So you don't have a new number on that?
I don't have a new number on that. Well, actually, I have a new number, but I don't have how it will impact it'll change several pieces on here. And Carolyn, I think I left that right on my desk as we were just talking about it.
I'd rather wait till we can actually get the numbers
Yeah.
and not, we literally found this like 10 minutes before we walked across the parking lot. So,
Okay. Thank you.
I don't know. It was there Friday, and we worked Saturday and Sunday, and apparently somewhere in the, in the waning hours of the night, I don't know, we hit a button and out that person went. So we're sorry. We will have to, we'll have to
we'll have
fix
to
that.
put him back.
Yes, we will have to put them back. Facilities, the addition there is, we have wages is the predominant increase there, again, predominantly hourly staff in facilities. We also have increases in property and casualty insurance, that's about 27,000 of that total increase. And then for electricity alone, the high school increase is $97,000 and the elementary school is $71,000. So about $168,000 of that is projected increase in electricity, and I just hope we have enough in there. We're quite concerned about that. I know some districts are establishing facilities reserves, but that is where we landed for right now. Transportation, the increase there is that we added a bus and an additional driver through, just at the end of, yes, I think that was added it was added at the end of this year. Debt service changes there is just a decrease from paying off some buses. And then for food service, I'll just talk about this piece in conjunction with revenue down below under food service allocation. So the food service decrease of 13+%, we're not going to stop serving students, but all this year, lunch and breakfast has been free for all students. And even though that allowance ended, that was a federal allowance that ended just a little bit ago, the state of Maine has extended that for the upcoming year. So we're predicting a decrease in expenditures in the local share of food service. However, if you look down below at the food service allocation on the revenues, you'll notice there's an increase. So why is that? The increase is because since you withdrew from RSU 24, there are, the food service has been in the red, and so per the auditors, that debt needs to be taken care of. So the additional $28,634 is to make that account whole again. And let's see. So you have the total there on the expenditure side then for K-12 education at 5.9%, and then adult education outside of the regular budget, we add this in here at the bottom, and essentially you'll see, I know it's a larger increase, smaller budget, but that additional $44,000 approximately, that is predominantly lease and utilities. The increase in the rent for next year is $24,000, and the electricity increase is about $8,000. So we will be keeping that in mind as we move forward down the road. Again, adult education serves so many students and people from all around the Ellsworth area, from GED to a wide variety of programs. Putting that together with the revenue side, and I won't go into detail for every single one of these. If you have additional questions, feel free to ask me. But essentially, a decrease in the required local share for next year of a little better than $500,000. additional local to fund the expenditure side, the opposite, up about $500,000. Right now, we have applied $2 million in balance forward and $75,000 from the CTE fund balance. And for tuition, we're anticipating we think the numbers will be steady for tuition students, which are at the high school, of course. We take students from many surrounding towns that don't have their own high school. And so that's just the projected increase in the tuition rate. Food service allocation we talked about. The state subsidy allocation, again, an increase there. That's a good thing. A little decrease in the CTE allocation. Remember, some of these numbers are derived from data that's 1 or 2 years behind. So I'm not concerned about that. In fact, the technical center, while that may have been a year or two, you may have had a little dip in enrollment, which is likely due to the pandemic. For next year, the enrollment is 310, Mrs. Bowles? Which is an increase of how many students? 100?
Yeah,
About 100, so go HCTC. So that's fantastic there. And then miscellaneous revenue, projected increase of 95,000. Those are various things such as special ed reimbursements, state agency client reimbursements, and also fees from Hancock and Lemoyne for their shared services. They pay a portion of the business salaries in the central office. So putting that together and looking also at the impact from adult education, the grand total is an increase of about 72,000 and or 0.63%. And again, we need to make a minor adjustment and we can take care of that after this meeting and get that right back out to you.
So, can you, I'm just having trouble reconciling. So the expenses are increasing by 1.4 million,
Yes,
and the revenue is increasing by 820,000.
yes.
Where's the difference of 613,000 of revenue?
That was, may I?
Yes, please do.
So if you recall, last year, a supplemental budget was passed by the governor in the legislature. And at that time, we received additional subsidy. I'm just looking for my notes. There it is. The additional subsidy was just shy of $697,000, of which $200,000 was used to reduce the local tax burden. We then also added half of an EHS health teacher to bring that position to full-time. We replaced the failed HCTC boiler for about $92,000. And we had proposed a regular ed reserve, which we have not done anything about at this point. The interesting thing was, when we went to adjust our financials, and I uploaded those financials to the state system, they rejected them. And interestingly enough, it's really kind of hard to explain, but they had me increase expenditures for the expenditures I just described to you, and then make a change in the revenue so that the revenues and expenditures no longer equaled. When I originally did my adjustments, because by statute, we are required to have our revenue figures match the expenditures. This is really mind-blowing for me, and it's very mind-blowing for the auditors. But that's why the differences exist. The revenue was top-heavy, and the expenditures were not. I wish I had a full budget to show you revenue versus expenditures, but if you
And
look.
when you're talking, what, you're talking about this fiscal year?
FY '22.
So how does that carry over to,
Because when you do the comparison of expenditures to expenditures, normally, if expenditures and revenues always match, the change in the budget from year to year, the change in the expenditures and the change in the revenue matches. I'm trying to explain why they don't in this case. It's because the FY '22 revenue and expenditures don't match. So the changes, the percent change will not match. So for instance, so if you look at the total expenditures, not including adult ed, for FY '22, and the total revenue for FY '22, they do not match. There's a $600,000 difference right there, and that's
Right.
the difference in, that's how they had me apply the additional subsidy and how to reflect the additional expenditures. That came from Denise Towers at the Department of Education. She's on the finance team, has been there a very long time. So because those don't match, the differences, but you know, you do see that the 24.9 million matches for FY '23, revenue and expenditure. But the change from revenue year to revenue year and expenditure year are gonna have different differences. It's really kind of wonky.
And the auditors are, what are they gonna do with it?
They have the write-up, I provided them with the write-up from Denise Towers, and they're going to keep it in mind for other school departments that also received additional funds. That this year, the year, FY '22 year, our revenues and expenditures did not need to equal. Or we were told they would not equal. I'd be happy to send you that email that I'm referring to, if you like. I can email that to you if you'd like to see that.
But it's just because they were wanting to count that money in a different way, and they didn't want to count it in your usual. They wanted to count it on some other separate scale?
I don't know, I cannot offer you with an explanation of why they say this is the correct way to do this. I originally wrote it up, and the original financials that I uploaded had revenues and expenditures matching, and they rejected it, and then told me how to enter the numbers.
And we
I'm
don't
sorry
bite the
for
hand that
being
feeds.
so unclear. But, I'm sorry, what were you saying?
I said, we don't bite the hand that feeds, so
There is that.
when they tell us to
Um,
do it a certain way, that's how we load it. But yes, we could provide that. That'd be helpful for folks who'd like to look at that.
Yep, I'll make a note.
So is the increase in expenses, the 1.4 million, is that an actual increase over last year's budget, or is that a factor of what you just explained? Because when we look at the difference between last fiscal year, there's a $1.4 million increase.
Mm-hmm.
Is that just the actual costs that you've gone through? That's what,
That is.
when Ellsworth residents look at this, the school department's budget is going to increase by $1.4 million for next year.
When you compare the budgeted expenditures for FY '22 to the budgeted expenditures for FY '23, yes.
And you're saying that there's only a just under $72,000 increase to,
Local appropriation.
Correct. Because of increased revenues offsetting that, which will not be, the caveat is going forward, there will be challenges. As you know, in years past, and I've been, diving into prior year's budgets to take a look, and the school department has definitely tried to hold the line at small increases. The balance forward was the same almost 4 years running, and there was a lot of consistency. And then, as is with most school departments, COVID hit, and there are lots of inconsistencies. So even applying $2 million of fund balance going forward, that I would not anticipate that would be the case, that we would be able to do that. I mean, we have many unfilled positions. I don't even know how many unfilled ed tech positions there are right now, 12, 13, custodial positions, all kinds of things that were not able to be filled. So, it's not that they aren't needed. We have staff that have been doubling and tripling up with students and doing all sorts of different things, so, along that line. So certainly we will be mindful of that moving forward. That is a very, that's a very small increase for next year, but, again, we want to apply as much fund balance as it seems prudent to do, keeping in mind that the city departments in general, all of them, with things that are going on, are trying to keep the budget increase to a minimum for next year.
Last question that I have is, what is the total fund balance? You have 2 million that you're applying, but what's your total remaining?
I have an estimate. As you know, our FY '21 audit is not done at this point. What I have for fund balance, general fund balance, as of June 30th, 2021, is $4,077,000. Plus about $281,000 for CTE fund balance.
And that's inclusive of this 2 million that you're moving from that? Or is that what's remaining?
That's before the 2 million.
That's before the 2.
That's before the 2 million. We started with 4 million. And I think we are going to generate about between 1 and 1.4 million of surplus this year, is my best guess at the moment. It's a very rough guess.
What was that, 1 point?
About another 1.4 million, between 1 and 1.4 million.
There are also reserves that were authorized to be established last year, correct, Carolyn, for FY '22 that would come
They were not
out of that?
authorized.
They were not
No,
authorized?
we did not take it, there were no city council orders
Oh, okay, I see.
put forth or approved.
Okay.
But there were conversations about doing
Okay.
it, but it had not happened.
That certainly would be wise going forward, in my opinion, to establish reserves for a special education reserve and a facilities reserve. There are the list of facilities items that are needed, particularly at the high school. It's not that the list itself is so long, the cost of the items are very high, and they're prioritized, but they are not all included in this budget, or you could easily put another $1 million in here. But things like replacing the track lighting and the track itself, there are very significant needs there that we'll have to talk about in partnership with the city and determine that going forward. The roof the roof at the high school has been in a 5 or 6 stage process, I believe. The first 3 stages have been completed. And so in order to keep this budget at a minimum of an increase this year, the roof is not in the budget for next year. The other critical item was the bleachers inside the gymnasium. We did one side of the bleachers, but we haven't done the other side. I don't think that going out to bid at this time, I'm not even sure if you could get the roof done certainly not this summer, perhaps maybe next year, right at the end of the school year, but that would be challenging. So we've left the bleachers in here, but the plan would be to move forward next year with those final phases of the roof, and then again, the track going forward. But you have a lot of aging equipment, furniture, things like that at the high school.
Okay, it wasn't my last question. Sorry.
That wasn't your last question?
I lied.
Ask your question again, I'm sorry.
No. I said it was my last question, then you started talking, and then I have more questions.
No, I'm sorry. I'm not taking any more questions.
So you have, then you have about a $3.7 million fund balance.
Yes.
And how does that fund balance relate to state regulations in terms of keeping, there's so much that you can keep over so many years? We ask this every year, and it's very confusing to me every year. And
That's a
so-
great question. Glad we let you ask that question. So actually, there is, the required amount that districts are encouraged to have on hand for fund balance was actually increased this year for the first time ever. I believe that's 8% now, Carolyn, does that sound right?
I think it's 5%, they're phasing it in.
Okay. So, which,
I'd have to pull the statute up to see exactly.
in part a sign of the times, but certainly, you know, again, if some of that could be used to dedicate to some reserves, that would be beneficial, or, you know, because of the nature of COVID and budgets, you know, looking historically, the school department will not continue moving forward to have that level of fund balance. There's no way, you know, typically each year you use about $875,000. That was where it was almost for 4 years of running. So there was a very stable, you know, relationship between that and your budget. And then COVID came in, you know, grant funding was coming in after budgets were passed. We couldn't fill positions. And there were pieces that you could pay for with grant funds. So that's beneficial, but going forward, if we're not careful, there really will be a big cliff there. I can see that. Again, the expenditure side, you know, you've had very minimal increases, and I don't anticipate annual balance forwards of, you know, 1.3, 1.5, and $2 million after COVID. You can clearly see from the numbers that that has just been part of the pandemic, so.
On last year, the 695,000, we got an
roughly.
additional funding after the budget was passed. Was 200 that was set aside?
200 was not set aside, it was used to reduce the local tax burden for FY '22.
And is that for FY '22 or '23?
'22,
Okay, so that's been done and
yes,
gone.
yes.
And that was done after the budget was passed?
Yes.
I think the state, there was a change in the funding.
It happened in July.
Yes. It happened after you had already passed your budgets.
Did we get the?
Yeah.
Okay. And my other question, you mentioned COVID funding, Katrina.
Yes.
What's the balance? What is left on that?
Okay, so, the total awards, that the school department has received since the beginning, so almost, you know, more than a 2.5-year time frame, is about $6 million. All of these, any of the awards you can see right on the Department of Education's website as well. They're very, very well publicized, so, the remaining balance of approximately $900,000 is allocated for things like, things that were allowable under COVID rules, but in general are also facilities projects that will enhance the safety and health of the facility so that they're allowable, and then we don't need to do them through the local budget. So for example, flooring in the library is set to be replaced. The carpeting is the original carpeting, needs to come out, and we won't replace that with carpeting. That will be just a laminate flooring that's done in there. That's budgeted at $50,000. The windows, the second and third floor windows of the high school, there are 26 of them that do not open. So those need to be replaced. That's a life and safety issue. That's budgeted at $75,000. I'll be impressed in the current time if we can replace 26 windows for $75,000. I could be wrong. I hope I'm wrong.
Yeah, I was just doing the math in my head. Good luck with that one.
Thank you very much, yeah, and then we have a portion of that funding, 20% of that has to be a set aside that is directly for student services to help offset what they title learning loss. So we have hired 2 math interventionists, and those positions are projected to come out of that funding. That remaining balance is to be used between now and 2024. And so about 340,000 of that is for those math interventionist positions, directly serving students.
More than that,
More than that, actually.
yeah.
So give or take roughly, that leaves about 400,000. There are other pieces that are allocated, and of course, anything else that comes up between, now and that time. But there is a long list of items that were approved to come out of there, and some of those if there are some things we can hold off on, we're definitely, holding off a little bit to make sure there's not something more crucial or emergent that comes up. Many districts have hired additional guidance staff, LCSWs, things of that nature for social and emotional needs of students that have become ever present during the pandemic.
Has the roof that encompasses the library, has that been replaced yet?
Yes, that portion has been replaced.
Okay. I'd hate to see a new floor and then all hell
Yes,
break loose.
yes, I'm glad you said that. So actually, and we haven't done the floor yet, there are a couple places with that particular project where we're still seeing a few challenges. We've had the folks that did that work come back apparently to look at that once, and I'm not sure what they did, but as of a couple weeks ago, we still have some additional challenges with that project that need to be addressed. So we'll make sure we don't do the library flooring until we're certain that there's one or two small areas that we're still having some trouble with leaking.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
That's okay.
Described in my very layman's non-roofing
So you said with
person
the
terms.
remainder of the COVID money, you're gonna hire 2 teachers for learning loss for math at 340,000.
We actually, they're already in place. I believe, did they start this year?
Yeah.
And so we already have them in place, one K-8 and one at the high school level.
That's correct.
And so what happens next year and the year after that and the year after that? The taxpayers are gonna have to pick up the learning loss? Or is
So
this a
they're funded for
short-term
2 more
position?
years out of that COVID funding.
And then after that?
After that, if we want to keep those positions and the data shows that that's been beneficial, then, we would have to look either to see if there's new grant funding or,
And how many special ed teachers do we have already?
The math interventionists are not special ed,
They don't serve as special
Right.
students.
that's right.
it's regular instruction
Okay, so special ed is for what then?
for disabilities.
Okay, so we're spending $4 million on disabilities for what's considered special education? Almost 4.7 million on special education.
Yes, yes.
But
And
only
those costs
1.9 million
That is
for-
correct.
those costs are ever increasing, and all the requests that we have for next year are not included in this budget.
Okay, so can you define what exactly is special education?
Sure. One of building principals, want to talk a little bit about special education and student needs and how they're served? Oh, don't be shy.
Rock, paper, scissors, go.
I wouldn't, you're not in the budget.
Oh,
That'd be a freebie.
throw that right to your wife, and you can go sit with Manager Mosher, because he's giving back too.
So really, any student that has an individual educational plan is called an IEP. They fit under special education. And to get an IEP, if there's any learning deficiency, they're tested, and then they fall under that umbrella, and they're considered special education. And so it goes from life skills to some students that are in the mainstream and just have services, and they may use those services. Some may go through Ellsworth High School, for instance, and have an IEP but never use services. But it's still something that we have to have in place for all students. And then we have life skills students, which, they don't really leave that room. And most of them each have an ed tech, and so it's another adult with them all the time. We do have some that are mainstreamed and have an ed tech with them, which meaning is a one-on-one for different various reasons. So, yeah, we have, like most schools now, like most districts, we have a decent percentage that fall under special education.
We're required to do this, right?
Yeah.
By
Yeah.
federal law. Yeah.
Yeah. So anybody, what that means, anyone that has an IEP, and there's a team, an IEP team, that kind of devises a plan, develops a plan, and lawfully we have to follow that plan. So if it's decided they have to have a one-on-one, we have to have an adult with that person all the time. If they have services where they may have services for English and social studies, then we have to make sure that that plan has that in place and their schedule has that in place, so
I know the
it's not really a
services, yeah.
choice.
Services such as OT, PT,
Mhm.
Right.
speech and
now-
language.
Yeah.
Now, OT and PT, wouldn't that be something that falls under main care? I mean, main care covers occupational therapy, it also covers physical therapy. So why is it also being covered in the school? Because the taxpayers are basically paying twice for it. If you're paying state taxes, you're paying for main care, which covers those services. But if you're paying your local taxes and it's also done at the school, it would seem like you're paying twice.
I don't have an answer for you.
Not all students have main care, though.
Thank you.
Well, health insurance.
But under, and this is a
Under
question,
IDEA,
but
yeah.
once you're under an IEP, the family's not obligated to use insurance, is that accurate?
Yes. And not every student's eligible under main care as well, so.
Okay. And what are the ESL classes? What are those?
English is a second language, so those are students who come and speak no English at all, and so we're required to provide services for them as well. Generally, it could be migrant students, or they've moved here from another country, or,
And that's $128,000 for English as a second language, yet our gifted and talented program is roughly budgeted nearly the same amount.
Gifted and talented is a identified area of need. That is a half-time position right now, and I would say that is woefully small. It's, GT can service 2% of the population, so, and in many cases, we can't fill it, and it's hard to fill those positions half-time. And so it would be good, am I pushing on something? Oh, no, it's a truck out there beeping. That would be a position going forward that if funded at full-time, we would probably have a much better prospects of filling that and serving student needs. And it's a high needs area anyway. It's an area that's difficult to fill.
We do have a full-time GT teacher at the middle school.
Thank you. K-8, okay. But at the high
Thank
school,
you.
only half-time, correct? Right.
What is the total number of students in the entire Ellsworth school system, K through 8 plus HCTC?
We run around 1,300.
Yeah,
Plus HCTC.
yeah.
Plus 1,300
Roughly.
plus HCTC, or just 1,300 with HCTC?
I think it's
I'd have to-
1,300 plus HCTC.
Because some of those kids would be in both counts, about, well, I don't want to say half, about half are Ellsworth students and about half are sending
Yes.
counts.
I have a little over 100 that are from Ellsworth High School.
And what are the number of students from outside of Ellsworth proper?
At the high school, not quite half of the students. I would say. About 40%, okay.
What's the total number of students at Ellsworth High School?
We're at 523.
So 523, and it's 40% that are from,
Sending schools. Yeah. So Hancock, Lemoyne, Surrey.
and what is the
Beach Hill.
tuition cost per student per year?
It's under 11,000 for high school.
I need to turn
I
this
don't
on.
remember, I don't remember
That's
the
okay.
exact figure, but
So 11,000 for
it's
tuition,
around 10.8, something like that, yeah.
and for the elementary school?
About 8, it's around $7,000, $8,000.
High school. And that is middle and elementary, or just,
Yes.
We have very,
We don't have
very
many,
few
very
tuition
few.
students.
Because they have their own elementary
Correct.
schools.
The only school here that has elementary school choice in Hancock County, I believe, is Franklin. They have school choice only for the K-8, and then they do not have school choice at the high school level. They go to Sumner.
And then there's education in the unorganized territories.
Correct.
Those are the majority of the K-8 students.
Do you know,
Very
April?
few, I would say less than,
10?
10,
I would say less than 10,
Yeah.
yeah, for sure. I was gonna say.
10 or 12, I'm just
Yeah.
thinking about my spreadsheet, you know, it's not very many.
I had to do some math here. Should go to Ellsworth High School, get their math specialist.
So there's a pause. I just want to usually set this up so that anybody that's listening, just in terms of the process that we go through as a council, this will be on our agenda, well, it is on our agenda for next Monday. And our responsibility as a council is to either support the budget in its entirety as presented, or to modify it. We only have the authority as a council to modify it in dollar amounts. We don't have line item authority, so we can't sit here and say, well, you should cut this, that. If the council wanted to reduce the budget by $500,000, that would be what happens, and then that, if we make any changes to the budget in terms of that dollar amount, it goes back to the school board, and then they go through a process to reconcile that. Ultimately, once the council approves a budget that's been submitted, that budget is then put on referendum where the citizens vote on and have final say on the total budget. So that's the process that we follow. That's our responsibility as a council. Having this process provides information to the community and gives us an understanding about that. The other thing, which I'll also say at the time of the voting, since we don't vote here, but I always want to be on record, my wife is a teacher in the school system. And I will say this when it comes time to voting, I don't recuse myself from the voting because we don't have the authority for line item. So I have no influence on any kind of personal gain around that. So just to go on record. Okay.
So looking at the total budget,
Superintendent King? Hey, it's Bob. Hey, I just wanted to clarify something. When you talk about required programs, you're talking about things that are required by the state, and if you don't fulfill those, we are opening ourselves up for litigation. Is that right?
Absolutely.
Okay. And also, I just wanted to ask about the electricity costs. I know the city didn't calculate the new solar into that, and I don't think you did either. Could you talk about that?
I did try to factor in the fact that the solar farm will be coming online. If I had not, I would have really had to blow up the budget. Just to give you a little background, we, like the city, went out to bid and had locked in with a 3-year contract for electricity rates. And if you probably all recall the huge storm that happened in Texas where people were without power and it was very, very cold. Liberty Power was our provider, and they were based in Texas, and they went bankrupt. Some of their contracts were purchased by other providers, such as Hancock and Lemoyne, because we went out to bid with them, so I know about that. Ours were not purchased at the school department. They went back to standard offer. And since January, our electricity bills literally have doubled. So if I was to just budget based on how much electricity costs between January and now, I would be probably increasing things another 30%. So what I did was I projected a year at the current rates and tried to take 85% of that on the hope that we will see a 15% savings, because that's what I'm getting promised as a private person from these solar farms, so I just pick that number out of the air, and, because a lot of budgeting is throwing darts. And so that's where I threw the dart. So I did try to include that.
Certainly a challenging time to have a geothermal system at our newest school where essentially everything is electric, so. It's good for many, many other reasons, however, but.
Does that answer your?
Seeing doubled electricity bills come through
It was shocking.
the mail, shocking. I think that's part of our, I wouldn't, I guess conservative is probably too strong a word, but thinking about use of fund balance and that going forward, just in what we've seen since February. And hopefully that trend won't continue, but those are enormous electricity bills that are coming through.
I think you're muted.
Oh.
Not you, dear.
Someone behind me.
Counselor Miller, did you have something?
No, I'm okay, yeah, thank you.
Okay. Counselor Gaff?
So looking at the total number of students and you divide everything with the budget, it's roughly $19,000 per student, but the tuition rate is only $11,000 or $8,000. So is there any negotiation with the outlying towns to maybe pick up their share?
The state sets the tuition rate. And the calculation is not based on taking the entire budget and looking at it on a per pupil basis the way you just did. And similarly, when they calculate subsidy, it's done in a more fragmented way. So only certain things are taking into account when subsidy is calculated. And then they do an adjustment to the ultimate number that they provide for you. So for instance, they look at student-to-teacher ratios, and they use a matrix of average salaries to determine how much per pupil we're expending based on the number of teachers. But they look at special education separately. They look at GT separately. That's not included in the calculation. They look at HCTC separately. So only certain, going back to the tuition, only certain things are factored in to the tuition rate. And I can't tell you exactly what those numbers are or factors are off the top of my head.
I'll give you a lot of credit between, funds that you can't carry over and you can't make this match that, and then they're gonna kind of play a few cartwheels with cost per student.
Yeah.
I don't know how the heck you do it. I really don't. Because, basic math would say it's roughly $19,000 per student.
Yep.
But the outlying towns are only paying $11,000 in tuition, so that leaves the Ellsworth taxpayer to pick up the difference.
It kind of does, yeah. Kind of does.
And per student, if we factored in, the special education pieces, we have, depending on what student needs are, it wouldn't be 19,000 per student. There are, things that are more costly and then things that are less costly. Yes, you're right, though. It's very, very challenging.
I would say, going back to one of the points you made, and we've talked about this for a couple of years, that fund balance of 3.7, these costs that we're seeing are likely not to decrease in future years. This isn't something that is a one-time purchase that's going to go away. These are costs that are going to be there. And we're putting in, last year we put in 1.8 million. This year we're putting 2 million of fund balance. At that pace, in a couple of years, the fund balance is gone, and it's not available, and that would mean instantly, that's the cliff you're talking about,
Yes.
is a $2 million hole that would need to be filled from the tax base. And so it's just important that as a community, we think about that going forward in terms of how do we address that, all at once, gradually, and we only have a few years left based on the pace at which we're spending that down.
That's a great point, and again, as an interim, there's only so much I've been able to dig into your prior, your prior history with the budget, and there are excellent records. Hats off to Dan Higgins, he kept meticulous notes, but in looking at that historically, really those small increases, which absolutely trying to be, fiscally prudent, but 0% increase in FY17, 0.48 in FY18, 1.9 in FY19, 2.9 in FY20, and then 0.03 decrease in FY21. And so, and again, some of those years are pandemic years where everything's, really been out of whack, but, putting together a budget, we have these requests, but the reality is we have a high school that competes for high school students with other area high schools. And you have a school system that we need to do the best we can to serve students. We want to do new things and innovative things. We need to have a 5-year strategic plan moving forward, and I think citizens expect that. And if you're, this budget, a flat budget, as you know, it's a cut. There's lots of places that are reduced in order to offset those increases. We completely understand the times, but going forward, how does the school department manage the need to, we're the largest part of the city budget, the biggest department, and at the same time, we need to grow and do good things for students and support them. That's really important. That's what excites and energizes teachers and students in our schools. And there's excitement among that leadership team, and I want to support them in being able to do some great things going forward. So, hopefully some of these foundational pieces, again, getting the support they need for students with behavioral needs, that helps in a whole range of ways, but there's not a lot of growth in terms of programming and things like that here. And of course, you can't do that every year, but I'm hopeful that some of these other pieces will stabilize. The electricity pieces, some of those things we have absolutely no control over. I lay awake at night just imagining what we could do on that. There's a long list of things that get pulled forward every year. We could do this if we had this, and every year those things sort of stay on that list. And I wish we weren't spending additional money on electricity costs and fuel costs and things like that, because it'd be pretty exciting to see what we could do. And area high schools compete for students, so almost half of our students are tuition students. So it's important that we continue moving forward as a school department so that we can do those great things. Our kids deserve it.
But while we're competing for students at $11,000 for tuition, we're still paying $19,000 per student. So we're competing for students, but it's actually kind of, if you look at it from a business model, that's a loss.
Absolutely.
Because it's an
definitely for the
increased
high
cost to
school
the
piece.
Ellsworth taxpayer, which is who we have to answer to.
Yep.
And then looking at the, everything in the news is all a buzz of technical training. Yet our technical college only has a budget of $1.9 million, where we could really do some great work with that. Looking at, your garage budget or your vehicle maintenance and repair is expensive, yet you're also paying for ASE certifications for the kids at the technical college, but you're not utilizing them to actually do the maintenance on the vehicles for the very school department that they are attending. So, you look at things like that, there's a cost savings and an educational opportunity right there, just some out-of-the-box thinking.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Absolutely. The technical center, I would say, is at the top of the list for priorities, and there is community support moving forward to see some great things happening there. I will say for the technical center budget, Mrs. Bowles worked until about, 11:59 Saturday, on Thursday night for a grant that just came out. And so there were many items that were in the budget that we were able to take out and put into the grant instead, and hopefully we'll be able to obtain. So we do anticipate some growth and getting lots of pieces that we need out of that grant, but you can't leave it in the budget because if they're funded, then it's supplanting, so. But we're confident, we're gonna be funded. It's a great application, right, Mrs. Bowles? Exactly.
Well, and I would think that regarding the tuition students, it isn't just like a flat cost of 19,000 per student per year. So adding those, I'm not sure, is that really a loss, adding those students?
Well-
It is to the Ellsworth taxpayer, because
No, but I
we're
mean, if
paying the
it-
total budget.
If it's gonna cost, $1 million to educate 100 children, and then you add 10 more children and it costs $100, then that money is extra, right?
Right, exactly. So, and said another way, I think if you said, okay, XYZ small school, we're not gonna take your 10 kids anymore because, it's only X amount of dollars. If you took those 10 kids out or didn't take those kids, you
Didn't save
still
you
have to
any
run a
money.
comprehensive high school, so you wouldn't necessarily drastically reduce staffing or programming. You'd reduce some supplies, but, and also, any students that come to the high school that have IEPs, those special education costs are paid for directly from those sending school districts at the rate that they're incurred. So if they have a one-on-one educational technician that's $40,000 a year, we bill for those services, and the district is reimbursed for those.
Where is that in the revenues?
That's under the miscellaneous revenue, is that correct, Carolyn?
Yeah.
So out of the 4 million.
Some of it's in
4 points-
tuition, some
Okay.
of it's under miscellaneous revenue.
So tuition is 1.9 mil, and miscellaneous revenue is 343,000, but special education, and there's no way to know who's sending special ed kids versus regular needs, regular instruction students. That's 4.7 million.
I can tell you the majority of the special ed students are Ellsworth students. There aren't very many kids that I'm billing out for.
Right.
And the other thing about the per pupil cost, if you think about it from a business model perspective, you have your overhead, you have your building. The cost of lighting the building and heating the building's the same whether you have 100 kids or 200 kids.
Mm.
So you kind of have this infrastructure that contributes to the per pupil cost. As you add more students, you're really reducing the per pupil cost, if you think about it.
What's the student to faculty ratio?
Oh, gosh.
I don't know.
Building administrators?
We can get that to you tomorrow.
Yeah, I don't know that off the top of my head.
Councilman Howland?
Could we revisit the conversation that we had earlier about food?
Yes.
With all of the food insecurities that go on in the television and what have you, how long has Ellsworth school system provided breakfast and lunch?
Forever, because we're required to.
Okay.
Not free, though.
How long have they done it for free?
Since the pandemic would be, since students returned in the fall of 2020? Yes. I believe for FY '21 and FY '22, that's correct, yes, for 2 years.
Does anybody see any benefit in that before,
Yes.
And what would it cost to continue that?
More students are eating, a lot more students are eating, because they can, there's.
So what would it cost to continue that service?
It's continuing by the state. The state
Okay.
has re-upped it.
Yes.
The federal program has ended, but the state is continuing to pay for every student. We are not charging students next year.
Right.
So every student in the Ellsworth system will receive breakfast and lunch.
If they want to.
If they want to, yes.
It's available to them.
It is,
Correct.
absolutely. And there are districts, I mean, that's a great question. There are districts who, over the past few years have transitioned to that model where any student eats for free. Whether it's, we don't think there's any stigma, there really shouldn't be, of a kid going through a line. Every kid punches in a number. Nobody knows, who is a full paying student and who is, receiving free lunch benefits because they're eligible. And I think our staff does a great job at making sure that that's completely anonymous. But either way, if everybody's going through and they're all, everybody's free, I do think it encourages more kids to eat.
And if the state wasn't paying for that service, what would it cost the city of Ellsworth? In a round number.
I know Ray figured it out a couple years ago.
Yeah.
What do you mean by what would it cost? I can tell you that a couple of years back, our unpaid lunch bills totaled around $30,000.
What I'm asking is, if we didn't have the federal government paying for it and now the state stepping up, what would it cost the city of Ellsworth to feed these students?
I'd have to ask the food service manager for that, only because some of the food we receive is through what's called commodities, and so we receive it at a very greatly reduced rate. And then other pieces that we purchase, I don't know, to be honest with you, I'd have to ask that. I know he can give us that. I know in years past, we looked at that. so.
I don't have a copy of the food service budget with me, but it's basically what is the budget? And that's what it would cost the city if we weren't getting any money.
True.
So, at some point, do you see the state ending this? The federal government's ended it, do you see the state ending this?
No telling. I have no idea,
This is the first time the state has offered this service?
to my knowledge, yeah.
It would be great if they would continue it
Absolutely.
for a whole variety of reasons. In one point, exactly, building on what Carolyn said, is that at the end of every year, we have so many students who aren't eligible for free lunch, or they're eligible, but nobody will fill the paperwork, and sometimes we can certify those students so that they can get free lunch, and other times, for a variety of reasons, we're not able to get the information to do that. So they eat, and then we have debt at the end of the year that taxpayers end up covering anyways, so it would
makes
stand to
everything
reason
go
to me
smooth.
that all students should have free lunch and breakfast. Kids who are hungry have a really hard time sitting still in first period math class and, throughout the day. If they're hungry, they don't have socks, they're cold, whatever those factors are, there's a variety of staff that try to help address those issues for students.
Thank you.
You're welcome. It's a great question.
Abby says that she sits on that committee, and there used to be about $5,000 a year in unpaid lunches and breakfast
before the pandemic.
before we started the reimbursement from the federal government.
And there was a fund set up to cover that.
There's unfortunately a couple of things that are going on with the nutrition operation. One is going back to prior to COVID and prior to all the meals being paid, there was the issue of not always receiving the funds for students that were not free. And that money falling to the city taxpayers to make up the difference. But there's also the fact that the school nutrition program, there are no school nutrition programs that I know of that are profitable. They always lose money. Because you can't charge enough of a meal to cover the expense. And now, even though we're getting more money per meal, unfortunately, the cost of everything has gone up so much that we are still losing money. I thought, actually, at one point this year, that we might be in pretty good shape. Unfortunately, it's not the case.
I remember that bright, shiny moment when she told me that.
Yes, I was so excited. saw how many meals were being sold. Very exciting, but it's not adding up.
Can I ask a not food question?
Sure.
You're, in the budget, you're budgeting for all the positions that are open, right? Not just the ones that are filled, or just the ones that are?
Yes, the ones that are open are still in there because we still need to fill them. And then there are multiple positions that we were not able to include across, across the board, so.
That you weren't able to fill?
We did not include them.
Yeah, we didn't add any positions, with the exception of the two ed techs that we mentioned earlier to help with behavior issues. The only positions, other than filled positions, are the currently unfilled positions. There are no other new positions in there.
Do you have any sense of enrollment for next year? Is it projected to go up or stay the same?
I think it will go up. It's steady at the high school from what we know right now for students that have registered. It's been down this year, and we know, like most every school, there's some students who went to homeschooling that just didn't come back or moved or what have you. There's just, wholesale changes there. Or for health reasons, there's just a variety of reasons. And we're starting to hear from more and more families about how do I re-enroll, how do I register for next year? So I would anticipate that those numbers would rebound next year, provided that, there's not, continued concerns with COVID.
So speaking of homeschool, there's a lot of people that have said that they have taken their students out of the Ellsworth school system because of social emotional learning, and that it's code word for critical race theory, diversity, equity, inclusion, that sex ed is just another word for gender pedagogy and whatnot. Can you shed any light on any of that and just clarify it for everyone?
I guess what I'll say about that is there was an excellent article that was in the Ellsworth American where the curriculum director and staff had talked about what they do and what they don't do, and stated very clearly we do not have a critical race theory curriculum. I know there will always be things in either a textbook, you'll come across something, or even in the library, there are books that you might want your child to read and I might not want my child to read. I mean, we're always going to have those challenges and have to continue talking about that going forward. How do we maintain access but at the same time be sensitive to the wishes of parents and their desire to have control and have a say in what their student accesses and doesn't access. I think in terms of programming, particularly if there's sex education, either at the upper middle school grades or the required health class at the freshman level, there are elements of that a parent could opt their child out of if need be. I'm less clear about that for the high school level. I haven't worked with high schools for a long time, but I'm assuming if there was a section, for example, around that a parent didn't want a student involved in, they wouldn't meet that particular standard, and there would be some alternative assignment, from another standard, for example, things of that nature. So I think the staff has been responsive to that as much as possible, but it will be an ever-growing need, I'm sure, moving forward. We had a math curriculum review this year, and I know the committee was sensitive to that and looking through materials, making sure that that we're we want a math program to teach math. That's what it needs to do.
Yes,
Just the
math is
facts,
math.
ma'am, please. That's what math programs should do. So
And there's no gender pedagogy at Ellsworth High School. There's no
not to my
gender
kno-
studies or anything like that. It's just kind of basic,
I'm not curriculum, so I can't answer.
I'm looking.
I'm not even gonna go there.
So, 'cause,
I'm just the bean
just
counter.
in, I'm a parent of a high school student,
Sure.
and I've asked him, so Sammy D, are you being indoctrinated? He's like, I'm not being indoctrinated, Mom.
Yeah.
So-
I have never heard that. That hasn't been experienced with my experience as a parent with my own two children. I would say there is a big difference. My own kids are 4 years apart. There's a big difference in students and the level of discourse that they're having about these things from my son 4 years ago to my daughter who's a senior now, because they've heard so much of it on the news, social media, from their parents. So there certainly are lots of conversations around that with high school students, and so they have their own ideas, of course, very diverse as well, about what they would and wouldn't want to see. But by and large, I think that the positive takeaway is that our students are very on their own, without any curriculum or anything like that, are much more accepting of all students and aware of the diverse needs and interests of their peers. So.
And so in your words, can you, in your words, or any one of you, define what exactly is social emotional learning at the Ellsworth High School? Or any
Social
part of
emotional
Ellsworth
learning at the Ellsworth High School.
or any one of them in the Ellsworth school system.
So I think one thing I wanted to add to what Superintendent Kane said, the importance piece of that is communication from parents. We offered a program, and we were going to talk about empathy, putting yourself in another person's shoes. Parents wanted to know how we were going to do that, what examples we were going to use, and I was able to share that with them. And we were using the book Charlotte's Web, How Does It Feel to Be Charlotte? How Does It Feel to Be Wilbur? As an example with conversations of empathy. So that's kind of an example of social emotional learning. What it looks like at the elementary school is, I see that you're having a hard time. We do relaxing, breathe in, breathe out, balloon breath, things of that sort. It's really helping students who are dysregulated to kind of become centered, and working on keywords to help focus on kindness. We use our 6 simple words, be a good citizen. I'm sorry, excuse me. It's a little nerve-wracking. You're all looking at me now. I got a little panic for a second. Being a good citizen, being responsible, being kind. We just use those words to jump off for that, and that's how we use social emotional learning in our piece. But the example of Charlotte's Web and empathy, I had a great question from parents. We were able to communicate directly with the teacher and our presenter and work that out, and we always gave the option to opt out of the lesson if they'd like to. We've had a couple of parents do that, not very many though, and the conversation was always open and pleasant. So really, I think the key moving forward with these critical conversations like that is just the communication and providing options and listening. I think that's an important piece. Hope that answers a little bit of your question.
And so is that why there's, like, every time the warrants come out, there's funding for the main psychological assessments, or is that something different?
That's something different, actually. We don't have our own psychological examiner for some aspects of students that are referred to special education. So we have outside people that are contracted with services if they need to be evaluated.
And is that for ADHD?
It could be for all, yes, anything, any learning disability.
Panic disorder?
Behavioral, yes. Some of the pieces we can do internally, learning disabilities, but there are other pieces that we don't do, and we outsource those. It'd be far too costly. Most districts don't employ that level of a specialist on staff. It'd be, we wouldn't have a full-time need for
A licensed psychologist.
Exactly, right.
So, obviously, you have at least that one change to make, and then
Yes.
the ripple effect. When do you need language for the agenda?
I've got the budget resolutions from last year already on there. Carolyn's gonna send me what she has, hopefully by Friday, is the plan.
With the numbers. So the question for the council is, do you feel like you had enough time to ask questions, to be able to take this up on Monday, or is there a need for us to schedule another meeting before Monday to have further discussions about this budget? Any preference? I mean, at this point, it's scheduled for Monday. If it doesn't pass as presented, then we will need to schedule some additional meetings, because we will need to get that on for the June, for the public to vote on, or it will end up being a special election, a referendum.
Well, I think where we just got the budget last night, and it is $25 million. You know, I think that, yes, we've gone through it, but we don't have line item power. I would just like to be able to review it a little more and ask a few more questions at some point.
Oh, no, well, you'll have that chance Monday anyway. What Monday will be is, this will formally be presented. We vote on it in different ways, there's different sections, but essentially this will come back to us. It'll be presented again, and we can continue to address it. I was just raising, did you feel like you needed or wanted a different meeting to do that, or is Monday fine? And then we'll just,
no, Monday's fine.
and we'll take it from there, wherever it goes.
Monday's fine with you? It's fine with me.
Is that?
If you have questions that come up between now and then, by all means, reach out. I have a town meeting tomorrow night, and then I'll be out of state in Washington, DC, from really Thursday through next Monday afternoon for the dedication of Luke Gross to the National Law Enforcement Memorial. But if I need to zoom in, other than Friday night when there's a candlelight vigil, I'll make myself available. Or you can call me, so whatever you need.
I have just one more kind of general question, kind of to what you were speaking about, which is that we're taking this $2 million out of the fund balance, right? Or sort of using that to pay for the budget, and maybe that's, if we keep doing that, we're gonna end up in a cliff. So what's the format? Like, you've asked us for this thing, only 0.63 increase, which we can approve or disapprove. But what's the format for, like, well, maybe we should spend a little more money this year so we don't fall off a cliff in 6 years? How would that happen?
It's the same process. The school board has the authority, so if.
So ultimately, they have to ask that question, and
They-
then we approve it.
Right, so they have to decide where the revenues come from. Some of the revenue's given, but they, like, if we cut it, they've got to decide how to cut it.
Yeah.
If we say increase the budget, they've got to come back with a budget, a line item budget, that they roll that in, and.
So it's an option for us to say, cut it, keep it the same, or increase it?
Wait, I mean, you can say increase it, but the question that would come back, I mean, the council would have to endorse that. I think
Yeah.
you'd run into the question of if they're presenting this as the budget.
Yeah, and I'm
but
just
it's-
asking it in the sense
but-
of like this,
right.
this question about thinking ahead, and,
In terms, right.
and do we have a role in that? And it sounds like maybe not. Maybe that's for
I
them
think
to
we
figure
can-
out, and then we,
No, but I think we
approve
can
it.
talk about it
Yeah.
and push it, and that might influence.
yeah,
that.
okay.
Yeah.
The
It does happen,
0.63.
it's happened, I've had that happen, you know, before. I know people think it's probably unheard of, and usually you are always, you know, anticipating, you know, a reduction, so, you know, we tried really hard to come in with, what do we absolutely need? There's, you know, there's things we don't want to live without, but we understand the position that the city is in, and our role is to, you know, we're partners in that. So it doesn't mean that all the needs are met, but neither are all the needs for every other department, you know, potentially. So we have a prioritized list, and we would look at a balance of things that would be one-time costs, so that they wouldn't, you know, they would pay for them one time and then they go away. And what are the other pieces, most likely personnel, that would be ongoing costs that would directly benefit students that are deemed the highest need and would have the biggest impact.
And let me give you a better answer. No, ahead.
No, that makes sense. I just needed to
Well,
understand how that
no,
works.
well, one place is, and we've done this in the past, is have the discussions about how much carry forward. And it's possible that the council would say, we're not ready to take this up. We suggest that you do this. Why don't you take that, have a discussion about it and come back? So I mean, there are ways to push an issue with, just by not voting. Councilor Gaffney.
And like areas that, you know, if I were to suggest increasing anything, it would be to the gifted and talented as well as the technical college, because, you know, in comparison to the rest of the budget, I think that you're gonna get a lot of bang for your buck locally with local services, with local tradesmen. I mean, we're paying a small fortune for diesel mechanics locally, and they have a diesel mechanic program right there at HCTC. And then, of course, the.
Yeah, I'm not sure that students can legally repair school buses, unfortunately. I think they have to be licensed to do so.
But they're getting their ASE certification.
They don't have that until the end of the 2-year programming. Mrs. Foles, is that correct? Would they not be able to do that? They can do some live work experiences. Folks will come in and they'll generate a cost, and they do some outside projects.
What about childcare at the Y? Are they able to help out there?
Yeah, we have been.
So, yes, for early childhood, our students do their live work experience. Some are set there and interning there. So depending on the program, what they're allowed to do and when they get their licenses kind of
And that's why the
influences that.
price of childcare at the Y is reasonable and affordable for a lot of families. And so this is what I'm talking about, where HCTC does have these programs that do benefit the local taxpayer as well, when they have preschool kids that can go to the Y and they don't pay $700-800 a week for it. So, same with law enforcement. You have the law enforcement program. So there's a lot of great programs available at HCTC. And if there's any area that I would say, you know, are they getting any live work experience at the lab?
Yes, our biomedical science students, yes, we have a great partnership with Jax. I need a new school, Michelle. Glenn,
That's another committee.
He puts his head in checkbooks. I just wanted to break it up, Glenn.
Do you take debit?
I was gonna say.
Remember, there is a committee that's working on it. And it's a public-private, so that's good.
Yes.
So-
No, I think that, you know, all through the news is all the talk about the technical trades and, you know, plumbers and electricians and welders, and, you know, you don't necessarily need a 4-year degree, and I think that the message is getting out.
But I think that our enrollment for the fall substantiates that greatly. I mean, we're at 230 right now, and we've accepted 310 for the fall. And a lot of the increases are from our sending high schools. So, yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, and for the GT program, the other piece, I believe, and by all means, Katrina, please correct me if I misspeak, but the GT program works by identifying students and then developing a budget around the students, and that budget has to be approved by the Department of Education. So it's very specific. So just saying, let's add more money to GT, it's not exactly how it works.
Is it all right if I say something?
No, you can stand there, though.
I appreciate Counselor Hanson's comment and question about the fiscal cliff, and I think we're all, you know, we brought it up because we know that if we don't be careful next year and the year after, we could be hitting a cliff. But we're hoping that we can be taking action in the years ahead. And there's been a lot of conversations on the board side with the superintendent and the business manager about looking at long-term costs and how to manage them, and working with the council on, you know, putting those costs like on a timeline and seeing what your costs look like also, because we have some big ticket items coming up, and they have to, you know, so there might be something that has to be done within the next 5 years, but there's some we have some flexibility in which year we do it or how we break it up into more than one year. And the city has the same thing. And, if there's a big thing that the city's got a budget for in 2026, and we were thinking we would do a big thing that, we want to have conversations with you so that, like quarterly finance kind of workshop, so that we can understand what these things are, the near term, the medium term, and the longer term needs, so that we can have a better handle on it, we can avoid those kind of fiscal cliffs. I also just wanted, if I could just make a quick observation about per pupil costs and tuition students. So if we have a budget that's, approaching 25 million, and we have, how many students did we say?
1,300.
1,600. And you divide 1,600 into that, you come up with 15,000 something per student. Now, that budget of 25 million, and it's not 25 million, but it's less than that, but I'm rounding it up. It's not all coming out of Ellsworth taxpayers, so we get the state subsidy as well. So I don't know what it actually costs Ellsworth per student, and we can figure that out, but I'm not, just glancing at the budget and doing some back of the envelope calculations, I think I'm not too concerned about $11,000 for tuition. Since I moved to Ellsworth, and certainly since I've been on the board, which was I got elected in 2014, I've always looked at the number of tuition students. As that number goes up, to me, that's a gauge of how well we're doing as a district. Just like the number of families who move to Ellsworth because they want to send their schools here, that's also a gauge of how we're doing. So it may be that sending students from other towns costs us a little more than our own students do, but I don't think it's a huge difference, and we can certainly crunch those numbers and figure out what it is. But I think that overall, if our numbers are going up, both from sending schools as well as, Ellsworth residents, that's a good sign. That means that people want to be here, they want to send their kids here, and it means that to me, it's an indication that we're doing something right. So I just wanted to put that out there. I'm really proud of what this school does for our kids, and I just wanted to say that. So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments?
Just that the sending towns have a mill rate of about $7 per thousand, and Ellsworth is approaching 19, so 17, 18, 19, depending on the year. So.
Okay, well, thank you.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your time, and thanks for your great questions. Look forward to working with you.
And we will end this workshop.